Good evening, and welcome back to SleepWise. Tonight, you don't have to solve anything. You don't have to hold the day upright for one more moment. Let your shoulders grow heavy. Let your jaw unclench. Let the small muscles around your eyes soften as if they're remembering how to rest. Feel the surface beneath you, steady, patient, supportive. Let your breathing find a slower pace, not forced, just naturally easing down. If your thoughts wander, let them wander kindly, the way you might watch a quiet boat drift across a dark lake. Notice the weight of your hands, the easy slackness in your fingers. Let your tongue rest in your mouth without effort. Let your legs sink from thigh to knee to ankle, as if gravity has finally been given permission to do its gentle work. Somewhere in the distance, perhaps there is a faint sound, a refrigerator cycling, a far-off car, the soft settling of a building as it cools. Let those sounds be part of the comfort, proof that you're safe inside a world that knows how to keep itself going. And as the room grows softer in your mind, we can step gently into another place, a small town resting in a valley just before sunrise. The streets are empty, the windows are mostly dark, and the hills around the town form a wide bowl that holds the night air close. A few porch lights glow amber. A lone traffic signal blinks to no one in particular. Somewhere far off, a delivery truck murmurs along the highway, not loud enough to disturb, only enough to remind you that the world keeps moving even when you choose to slow. You walk as if your footsteps are made of felt. The pavement is cool beneath you. A closed bakery sits on the corner with its chairs stacked neatly, and you can almost imagine the warmth that will fill it later. The first ovens, the first bread, the first quiet greetings. The air here is still. It has that clean, early morning scent, a hint of damp soil, a trace of pine from the slope above town, the faint mineral smell that rises from sidewalks after a colder night. Every breath feels a little smoother, a little quieter. As you stroll without hurry, you notice the edges of things becoming less sharp. Street lights wear soft halos. The far end of the block seems to fade into a gentle, pale blur. It's as if the town is being wrapped in thin layers of hush, one after another. You pause for a moment and listen. Even the silence has texture, a low, steady calm with tiny movements inside it. A leaf turns over somewhere. A sign creaks softly and settles. The world is not asleep exactly. It's simply speaking more softly. Toward the river, the air feels a shade cooler still. And with that first subtle veil of fog beginning to gather in the valley, you keep walking, slow, untroubled, letting the town guide you onward. The road dips gently, and the fog seems to deepen with it, collecting in the lowest parts of town as if it belongs there. It doesn't rush. It doesn't spill. It simply settles, patient and quiet, filling the shallow bowls between curbs and gardens. You might notice how it behaves like water in slow motion. The colder air hugs the ground and drifts downhill, while slightly warmer air lingers higher up along the slopes and rooftops. In a valley, that gentle sliding can be enough to gather coolness in one place, the way a basin gathers rain. A street lamp ahead turns the fog into a soft lantern. Light that would normally shoot straight down the street now seems to bloom outward, as if the air itself is glowing. Nothing is sharp-edged. The world looks padded, rounded, forgiving. And if you pause and breathe in through your nose, the air feels different here. Cooler, a touch heavier, as though it carries a little extra weight. That weight is mostly water, but not water you can see. All day long, the air holds invisible water vapor mixed in with everything else. At night, as the ground gives up heat to the open sky, the air closest to the ground cools too. There is a simple idea behind the fog that's gathering around you. Warm air can hold more water vapor than cold air. As air cools, there comes a point where it can't keep all that vapor hidden anymore. The invisible begins to show itself, not as rain, but as countless tiny droplets suspended in place. That turning point has a name, the dew point. You don't need the number, you only need the feeling of it. It's the moment the night becomes cool enough that moisture decides to appear. In this valley town before sunrise, the cooling happens gently. No drama, no storm, just a slow release of warmth from pavement, soil, grass, and rooftops. And as the temperature eases down to meet the moisture already waiting in the air, fog forms like a quiet agreement between them. If you lift your eyes, you can imagine the night sky as a wide open window. The ground has been letting its heat go all evening, slowly, steadily, sending it upward until the surface cools. When the wind is calm, the cooling stays close to the ground, and the valley holds it like a bowl holding cool water. That is why fog often loves the hours before dawn. The world is at its coolest. The air is most willing to settle, and nothing is stirring it too much. Everything is quiet enough for the smallest changes to matter. A lawn cooler than the street, a garden damp from yesterday, a line of trees that keeps the air from moving. You keep walking, and the fog thickens in small pockets, thinner again near a corner, then thicker at the next dip in the street. It reminds you that even stillness has shape, even quiet has terrain. Up ahead, a small park opens out, dark trees, a low fence, and a path that disappears into a pale silvery veil. You follow it without hurry, letting the fog guide you closer. The park path is darker than the street, and the fog seems to relax here, spreading out between the trunks of trees and settling low over the grass. Your footsteps make almost no sound. The air feels like it has been cooled and filtered. A bench sits beside the path, and when you rest your fingers on the wood, it feels slightly damp. On the metal railings, Tiny beads of water have gathered, each one catching a little of the streetlight's distant glow. A spider web stretched between two branches wears a necklace of droplets, so delicate it feels like it could vanish if you stare too directly. This is the same quiet process, repeated in 1,000 small places. Moisture in the air touches something cooler, a leaf, a car roof, a fence post, and it condenses into liquid. The water was there all along, just in a form you couldn't see. When the droplets gather on surfaces, we call it dew. When they gather in the air itself, suspended and drifting together, we call it fog. The difference is almost poetic. One chooses to cling, the other chooses to float. And even when fog looks empty up close, it isn't. The droplets need something to form around, tiny specks so small you never notice them. A bit of dust from a road, a grain of pollen, a salt particle carried inland from the sea, smoke from a faraway chimney. Each one becomes a quiet anchor, a place where moisture can gather without making a sound. That is why fog can appear so suddenly. Not because the world changes fast, but because the ingredients were already there. The air cools, the moisture agrees, and countless invisible meeting points turn into a soft, floating presence. The fog changes the way the town feels as well. It swallows sharp echoes. It smooths the edges of distant noises. A dog barking 2 streets away sounds gentler, as if the sound has been wrapped in cloth before it reaches you. If you breathe out slowly, you can even watch a little cloud form and dissolve. Your breath is warm and moist, and in this cool pre-dawn air it briefly reveals itself, then melts back into invisibility. It's a gentle reminder that the air is not empty. It's full of quiet ingredients, waiting for the right moment to change. You walk deeper into the park, and the grass beside the path is darker where it holds moisture. A low hedge seems to wear a thin sheen. Even the signs at the trailhead look softened, the letters slightly blurred by the veil between you and them. Humidity is simply the measure of how much water vapor is mixed into the air. You don't need a percentage to feel it. You feel it as softness on your skin, as a coolness that seems to settle on your eyelashes, as a hush that makes everything sound a little farther away. And then, beyond the park, you hear it, the faint, steady suggestion of moving water. The river is nearby, and the fog seems to lean in that direction as if it knows exactly where to go next. The river announces itself before you see it, not loudly, just a steady, continuous whisper, like fabric moving slowly in the dark. As you leave the park, the path rises for a moment and then drops toward a small bridge, and the fog thickens again as if it has been waiting there. On the bridge, you pause. Below, the water slides past in a dark ribbon, reflecting a few blurred points of light from the far bank. The air smells cooler here and slightly sweeter, like wet stone and clean leaves. Your breath feels slow and even, matching the pace of the current. The rail beneath your palm is cold, and it leaves a faint dampness on your skin. A few droplets cling to the metal, perfectly round, reflecting the dim world upside down. You can almost hear them forming, not as a sound, but as a sense of time passing. If you look across the water, you can see the fog settling into the lowest places first, along the river's edge, over the open fields beyond, pooling in the shallow dip where the road curves away. The land shapes the fog the way a hand shapes a blanket. It lies where it is asked to lie. Here, water is always quietly offering moisture to the air above it, and before sunrise, that moisture has nowhere to hurry. Open grass cools faster than brick, and the low meadows beside the water become perfect places for cool air to settle and for droplets to appear. This kind of fog is often born from a simple nighttime pattern. The ground loses warmth to the open sky, and the air closest to the ground cools with it. When the air is calm, the cool layer stays close, and the moisture in that layer begins to condense. It's called radiation fog because the cooling is driven by the quiet radiating of heat away from the surface, hour by hour. Sometimes the valley adds another gentle trick. A slightly warmer layer of air can sit above the cooler air near the ground like a soft lid. That lid keeps the cool air from mixing upward too quickly. It keeps the fog from being stirred away. You don't have to picture it as a barrier, more like a calm ceiling that allows the valley to keep its own private weather. You continue along the river path, and the world feels simplified. Fence lines fade into the gray. Trees appear as silhouettes, trunks and branches drawn in charcoal. The farther you look, the less you see, and oddly, the less you need to see. You let your gaze rest on the nearest tree, and the fog does the rest, deciding what to reveal and what to keep. Ahead, the sky is still dark, but it is no longer completely black. A faint, cool hint of light begins to gather behind the hills. The fog seems to notice, too, shifting almost imperceptibly, as if preparing to lift when the day finally arrives. For now, though, it stays with you, and you follow the river's whisper onward toward the first quiet changes of morning. The light behind the hills grows slowly, as if the morning is being poured into the sky one careful drop at a time. It isn't bright yet. It's a gentle paling, a cool wash that makes the fog look almost luminous, like a thin veil held up to the faintest lamp. Somewhere, a bird tests a single note, then goes quiet again, as though it is listening for permission to continue. The river still whispers, steady and unhurried. You might notice that the fog is not perfectly still. It drifts in small currents you can barely see, sliding around trees and fences, thinning for a moment, then thickening again. In places where the land rises even slightly, the air feels clearer. In the lowest hollows, the fog holds on. This is how a valley teaches you that weather has layers. The coolest air remains closest to the ground, and the fog lives inside that cool layer. Above it, the air can be a little warmer and a little drier, and so the fog's top edge often looks like a soft ceiling you could almost reach with your hand. And then, as the first hint of sunlight touches the surfaces of the town, rooftops, sidewalks, the tops of parked cars, those surfaces begin to warm, not quickly, just enough to change the balance. A slightly warmer surface warms the air that rests against it, and that warmer air can hold more water vapor. So the fog begins to loosen its grip. Droplets that were floating a moment ago start to evaporate back into invisibility. The fog doesn't disappear abruptly. It thins. It frays at the edges. It lifts in wisps. It becomes patchwork, revealing a hedge here, a mailbox there, a distant corner of street that had been missing. In places where the sun reaches first, the fog thins sooner. A roof catches light and clears, while the shaded side of a building stays dreamy and gray. Under trees and along the riverbank, coolness lingers, and the fog keeps its footing a little longer, as if it prefers the quiet shade. If a light breeze arrives, it helps the valley exhale. The air mixes a little more, stirring the cool layer upward, blending it with warmer air above. The soft lid that held the fog in place begins to weaken, and the town slowly returns to sharper lines. You can imagine stepping back toward your own warm room now, carrying the calm of the river and the park and the quiet streets with you. Perhaps you stand by a window with a mug warm in your hands, watching the fog outside like a slow curtain rising. The kettle clicks off softly. Steam curls into the room and vanishes, the way fog vanishes too. Not gone, only changed back into what it was before. And as the day waits patiently beyond the hills, we stay with this gentle in-between, the moment when the world is waking and you are allowed to sink deeper into rest. Nothing needs your attention yet. As you watch, the fog outside the window becomes a kind of slow lesson in patience. A line of houses appears on the far side of the street, then softens again when a thicker band drifts through. A street sign comes into focus, then fades, as if the town is practicing being half seen. It can be strangely comforting, this gentle limit on how far your eyes can travel. When we talk about fog, we're really talking about visibility, how far you can see clearly through the air. On a perfectly clear day, the distance feels endless. In fog, the world pulls in close, like a room with the curtains drawn. Meteorologists often use a simple cutoff. When visibility drops below about a kilometer, they call it fog. When you can see farther than that, but the air still looks milky, it's often called mist. You don't need the measurement, though. Your senses understand it immediately. Fog is the feeling that the horizon has been moved nearer. You take another slow breath and imagine stepping outside again, mug in hand, the warmth traveling into your palms. The air meets your face with a cool softness. The fog does not feel wet exactly. It feels like cool breath. It leaves a faint dampness on your eyelashes, a small chill on your cheeks. The night air here is close to full, the way a sponge is full when it can't hold another drop. That's what it means, in a gentle way, when the air is saturated. It's holding as much invisible water vapor as it can at that temperature, and so any extra cooling turns some of that vapor into visible droplets. Those droplets are tiny, often only a few micrometers across. They're far lighter than raindrops, and they're held up by the slightest movements of air, even when everything seems still. You might walk through fog without noticing any droplets at all, until you brush past a hedge and your sleeve comes away slightly damp, or you run your fingers along a railing and feel the cool slickness left behind. And notice how fog can be uneven, thicker on one corner, thinner on the next. Small changes. An open field that cools faster, a river that adds moisture, a wall that blocks a breeze can shift the balance just enough for droplets to appear in one place and not in another. Down the street, a parked car wears a thin sheen. The windshield holds a delicate film of moisture. In the morning, someone will swipe it away with a sleeve or a wiper, and the glass will clear in one clean arc, like a small sunrise. For now, the town remains hushed. The fog turns every light into a gentle bloom and every shadow into something kind. And as you walk slowly along the quiet street, you let your mind do what the fog is doing, letting sharp edges soften, letting distance shrink, letting the world feel close and safe again. All is well. You continue, and the streetlights feel different now, not like points, but like small moons suspended above the road. In clear air, light travels in clean lines. In fog, the light meets droplet after droplet, and each droplet gently redirects it. Instead of a single beam, you get a soft glow spread wide as though the air itself is shining. That is why fog makes halos, why porch lights bloom, why the edges of things look painted rather than drawn. The droplets in fog are often similar in size to the wavelengths of visible light, and that matters. When light meets particles of that scale, it scatters strongly in many directions, and the contrast between near and far begins to fade. The farther something is, the more scattering happens along the way, until distance simply dissolves. If you've ever driven in fog, you may remember how bright headlights can feel like they make it harder to see. That's because the light you shine forward is scattered back toward your eyes. So drivers use low beams, and some cars have fog lights angled downward, trying to light the road without filling the air in front of you with glare. Here, in this valley town, you're only walking, and the fog is kind. It turns the world into a softer version of itself. A mailbox at the curb becomes an island in a pale sea. A tree trunk becomes a dark pillar holding up a ceiling of gray. You listen again and notice another change. Sounds seem to arrive with less sharpness. The town feels padded, as if someone placed thick rugs over the streets. Often, it isn't the fog droplets themselves that muffle sound, but the same calm conditions that allow fog to form. Still air, stable layers, fewer gusts to carry harsh echoes around. In the quiet, even small sounds stand out and then settle. Somewhere a door closes gently, a dog shifts in its sleep. Far away, a train horn might be only a low suggestion, softened by distance and moisture, more comforting than urgent. And above you, the sky remains faintly luminous, but featureless. You can't see stars through this veil, and that too has a simple explanation. Fog is really a low cloud, and clouds are made of droplets that block and scatter light. What feels mysterious is often only the sky bringing its ceiling down to meet the ground. As you walk, you notice the fog is brightest around lights and darkest in the spaces between them. It teaches your eyes to rest on what is close. It encourages a slower pace, a smaller circle of attention. For a moment, you imagine the same fog in daylight. The world would look pale, gentle, almost silver. And sometimes, when the sun is behind you, fog can even make a faint white rainbow, a fog bow, formed by light bending and scattering through countless droplets at once. But for now, in the hours before sunrise, the fog simply keeps its soft hold on the town, and you let it keep its soft hold on you. A little later, you find yourself at the edge of town, where the houses thin and the land opens into fields. The fog here looks different. It lies low over the grass like a quiet lake, and above it the air seems clearer, as if the valley is holding its own secret lair. You can almost see where the fog ends and the cleaner air begins, a soft boundary drawn without a pen. You think back to how this fog formed, the ground cooling through the night, the air near it cooling too, the moisture turning visible when temperature and dew point finally meet. That is the classic valley fog, often called radiation fog, because it begins with the ground quietly radiating heat into the open sky. But fog has other gentle pathways into being. Along a coast, for example, moist air can drift over a colder ocean current. The air cools from below, and suddenly a blanket of fog is born and carried inland. This is advection fog, and it can roll in like a slow tide, filling streets and harbors, weaving between buildings, then retreating again. On hillsides, fog can form when air is pushed upward along a slope. As it rises, it expands and cools, and the moisture condenses into cloud and fog. This is upslope fog, the kind that can turn a mountain road into a quiet tunnel where pine trees appear and vanish like thoughts. And sometimes fog forms when cold air moves over warmer water. The warm surface adds moisture, and the cold air can't hold it. Wisps rise, twist, and fold back on themselves like steam from a cup. People call it steam fog or evaporation fog, and it can hover over lakes and rivers in winter, making the water look like it's breathing. There is even a kind of fog where droplets stay liquid below freezing, supercooled and silent, ready to freeze if they touch a surface. That's freezing fog, the kind that can glaze branches and wires with a fine glassy coating. You don't need to linger there tonight. You only need to know that water has many calm ways of changing its form, and the air is part of that quiet choreography. And if you ever wonder how forecasters anticipate fog, the ingredients are simple: moisture, cooling, and calm. A light breeze can keep air mixed enough to prevent fog from settling. No wind at all can allow it to pool. Too much wind can lift it and tear it apart. Fog is often the weather of balance. Back in the valley town, the fog feels like the mildest version of all these stories. It is simply the night cooling down, slowly, evenly, until the air lets go of what it can no longer hold. You turn back toward the houses, toward the soft amber lights, and you notice how peaceful it is to be guided by a world that doesn't demand distance. The fog offers you only what is near: a fence line, a tree, a sidewalk shining faintly with dew. And in that small circle of visibility, your mind can rest, because it no longer has to scan the horizon. It only has to be here. As the morning continues to gather itself, you notice the town making small adjustments, as if it has lived with fog for a long time. At an intersection, reflective paint on the road catches a little light and sends it back toward you. On a curve, small markers appear at the edge of the pavement, guiding any early driver who moves slowly enough to see them. The town has learned that, in fog, the world needs gentler cues. People do the same. They shorten their attention to what is close. They take quieter turns. They listen more. Even without thinking about it, they're responding to the simple physics of limited visibility. In places where fog is common, airports measure it carefully, not with poetry, but with instruments. They track how far a pilot can see down a runway, sometimes using sensors that look at how much light is scattered through the air. When the fog is thick, aircraft rely more on instruments and guidance systems than on the view ahead. It's another kind of trust, not in what the eyes can confirm, but in what the world has measured. Along rivers and coasts, people learned long ago to speak through fog with sound: a bellbuoy, a horn, a low call that repeats at steady intervals. Fog doesn't make a ship unsafe on its own, but it changes the rules of distance, and so sailors created rhythms to replace sight, turning time into a map. Even in a quiet valley, you can feel that same idea. When you can't see far, you live by what is near: the next step, the next lamp, the next safe corner of road. Fog also invites an easy confusion. Sometimes what looks like fog is actually haze. Haze is often made of dry particles, dust, smoke, pollution, hanging in the air and scattering light, especially in the distance. Fog is different because it is made of water droplets. Both soften the world, but fog has that cool, damp breath, and it tends to form when nights are calm and the air is ready to condense. There was a time when cities mixed fog with smoke from coal fires, and the result was a heavy, choking kind of smog. That's not the fog we're walking through tonight. Tonight's fog is clean and simple. the kind that arrives with cooling and moisture and still air, then leaves when the sun quietly warms the ground again. As you turn onto a smaller street, the houses look as if they're floating. A porch swing hangs motionless, barely visible until you're close. A garden gate appears, then passes behind you like a slow thought drifting by, and your own attention becomes the same way. You don't have to hold the whole town in your mind. You only need the next few steps. You only need the quiet, steady present. The fog teaches that lesson without insisting. It simply limits the view, and in doing so, it offers a softer way of being. Nothing more is required. By now, the sky has shifted from deep night to a quiet slate blue, and the valley begins to show its shapes again. The fog is thinning, but not in a straight line. It breaks into ribbons, then gathers in pockets, then loosens once more. A shallow dip in the road stays misty while a rooftop a little higher clears. Under trees, the air remains cool and the fog lingers, reluctant to let go of the shade. This is part of the slow morning physics, too. Sunlight warms surfaces unevenly. Dark asphalt warms sooner than pale grass. A brick wall holds heat differently than a field. As each surface warms, it warms the air touching it, and that warmth encourages droplets to evaporate back into invisible vapor. As the temperature rises while the dew point stays nearly the same, the air is no longer full. The same moisture is present, but the air has more room to hold it, and so the droplets melt away. The fog doesn't travel far. It simply changes state, returning quietly to what it was before. Sometimes you can watch a lifting fog form, where the fog's base rises off the ground, but the air still looks milky above, like a curtain being raised. That happens when the lowest layer warms first, while cooler, moist air remains just overhead. And sometimes the fog doesn't lift so much as it dissolves, thinning everywhere at once as mixing spreads warmth through the layer. A gentle breeze can speed that process. The air stirs, the stable layers soften, and the valley's private weather blends back into the larger atmosphere. The invisible returns to invisibility. And still, even as the fog fades outside, you can keep its feeling with you. The softness, the closeness, the permission not to look too far ahead. So, in your mind, you turn back from the street and the river and the fields, and you return to your own room. The bed is waiting exactly as you left it. The pillow holds the shape of your head as if it remembers you. The blanket settles over you like the fog settled over the valley, gently, without pressure. Take a slow breath in and let it go longer than it came in. You don't need a wide horizon tonight. You don't need sharp lines. Let the edges blur. Let your thoughts become less defined, as if they're seen through a thin veil of morning mist. If a memory rises, let it float past like a light that blooms and fades. If a plan tries to form, let it soften and drift away. You can return to it in daylight, when the world is clear again. For now, you're allowed to be close to the present. One breath, one quiet moment, and then another. Outside, the last wisps of fog will vanish when they're ready. Inside, you can do the same, slowly, naturally, without forcing anything at all. The world slows, and so do you. There is nothing else to do now, only rest, gently. The town is waking in small, ordinary ways. A porch light, it clicks off. A curtain shifts. Somewhere a kettle begins to murmur, and the sound feels gentle in the fog, as if the air is cushioning it. You walk slowly, not because you must, but because the morning seems to move at this pace, and it's easy to match it. In the pale distance, you can make out the faint shape of the hills that ring the valley. They look softer than they did yesterday, their edges brushed with gray. Fog has a way of making everything feel farther and nearer at once. The far world fades, and the near world becomes enough. You might notice how your eyes behave in this kind of air. They stop hunting for detail. They rest on whatever is closest: the wet shine of a sidewalk, the quiet shimmer on a parked car, the dark outline of a tree trunk. And when your eyes stop straining, your mind often follows. This is one of fog's quiet gifts. It reduces the amount of information arriving all at once. It narrows the scene, and in doing so, it makes space for calm. Even your skin seems to notice. The moisture in the air slows down evaporation, so the coolness stays longer. A breath in feels smooth. A breath out feels visible for a moment, then gone. The world is still full of water, but it is water in different disguises. Above you, the fog is like a low ceiling, and above that ceiling, the sky is already brighter. This layered feeling can happen when the valley holds cooler air near the ground, while slightly warmer air sits above it, keeping everything stable. It's called an inversion when the usual pattern flips, and warmer air rests on top instead of cooler air. In that arrangement, the cool layer can't rise easily, so it stays pooled, quiet, and close. If you were to climb the hillside right now, you might step out of the fog and look back down on it like a pale lake filling the valley. The town would be hidden beneath a smooth surface of cloud, and the higher air would feel drier, clearer, almost surprised. When you imagine it, do so softly. Picture air like sheets of silk laid one over another, barely touching, barely moving. In that quiet stacking, the valley keeps its overnight chill, and the fog remains content. A few steps later, you pass a small garden. The leaves are beaded with dew, each droplet catching a tiny version of the world. If you lean in close, you can see your own blurred reflection in the curve of water, and then it trembles and changes with the slightest movement of air. There's something comforting in that, too. Nothing is fixed, nothing is demanding. Everything can soften and shift without breaking. You continue toward the center of town where the streets meet, letting your footsteps stay light. The fog still holds the valley, but it is loosening little by little, and the morning is arriving without hurry. At the main street, you pause beneath an awning, where the air feels a touch warmer, as if the building is lending you a little of its stored heat. A shop window reflects your outline, but it's softened like a charcoal sketch. Inside, the shelves are dim and orderly, and you can almost smell coffee waiting to be brewed. The town isn't busy yet. It's simply preparing. When fog is present, small differences matter. A lawn cools quickly because it loses heat easily to the night sky. A road, especially if it's dark and dense, holds warmth longer. A river adds moisture. A row of trees slows the wind. Each detail becomes a tiny vote for fog or for clarity. That is why fog can form in patches. You might step from a street corner that feels clear into a pocket that feels milky, and then back again. The air is the same air, but the balance has shifted by a degree or two, by a little extra moisture, by a little less movement. A cyclist glides past, moving carefully, light reflecting off the damp pavement. Their wheels make a faint hiss, as if the road is exhaling. You watch them disappear into the pale distance, and you notice how quickly the fog can erase a figure. It doesn't feel threatening. It feels like the world is drawing the curtain more snugly. Wind is often the deciding factor. A gentle, steady breeze can keep the air mixed, preventing the cool layer from settling. Too much wind tears fog apart. Too little wind lets it pool and thicken. Fog prefers the middle, a calm that is not empty, but quietly balanced. And the valley helps. Its shape gathers the cooler air the way a bowl gathers water. It slows the escape of chill, especially when the sky is clear and the ground can radiate heat freely into the dark. You walk again, past a small bus stop with a bench that is faintly wet. On the glass panel, droplets gather and merge, forming slow trails that slide downward, leaving clean paths behind them. Each trail is a miniature river, and each river is a reminder that gravity is always working gently, even at this hour. If you touch the metal rail, it chills your fingertips, and you can feel how the night still clings to surfaces. That surface cooling is what starts the whole quiet chain. Ground cools, air cools, vapor condenses, and the valley fills with a low, patient cloud. A few windows begin to glow more brightly. Somewhere a garage door lifts, then closes again, as if someone remembered they didn't need to rush. The town seems to be learning the same thing you're learning now. You don't have to hurry through fog. You simply move through what is near, letting the next step appear when it's ready. And as you turn down a quieter side street, you begin to notice how the fog changes the colors of the world, taking the sharpness out of reds and blues, leaving everything in softer tones like morning painted with water. The side street is narrower, lined with small trees whose branches disappear into gray above your head. Their leaves whole droplets like tiny glass beads, and every so often one lets go, tapping softly onto the sidewalk. The sound is so small it barely counts as sound at all, yet in the still air you notice it, the way you might notice your own heartbeat when everything else is quiet. Fog invites listening. When the world looks closer, the ears begin to roam. You hear the faint scrape of a key in a lock. You hear a distant engine turn over, then idle low. You hear water moving through a gutter, only a thin trickle, but continuous. Sometimes people say fog carries sound. Often, it's the calm that comes with fog that makes sound feel clearer. With fewer gusts and less turbulence, noises arrive more evenly, without being torn apart, and moisture can soften the harshness of certain tones, as if the air is less brittle. The town becomes a quieter instrument, and everything plays in lower volume. You pass the bakery again, this time from the back alley where deliveries are made. A warm smell leaks from somewhere inside. Yeast, flour, the first hint of sugar. The scent feels stronger in the damp air, as if humidity helps it linger longer in your breath. The fog itself is simply droplets, so small that they fall very slowly, and they're often kept aloft by tiny upward motions of air you can't feel. They are lighter than dust motes in a sunbeam. They float not because they are defying gravity, but because the air is always moving in miniature. If you were to hold a jar of fog, you'd find it doesn't stay. The droplets would meet each other, merge, and settle. Fog belongs to open air, where it can be renewed and thinned and stirred. And that is why fog changes so quickly, even when it seems calm. A slight warming on one surface, a small breeze around a corner, a shift in cloud cover overhead, and the balance moves again. Water returns to vapor. Vapor becomes droplets. The town is breathing through states, back and forth. You reach a small intersection where the traffic light is still on its night schedule, blinking. The red reflection on the wet road looks like a ribbon laid gently on the pavement. In the fog, the color spreads, turning into a soft stain of light. This spreading is the same quiet scattering you saw around street lamps. Each droplet takes a little piece of light and sends it away in new directions. The world becomes luminous, not brighter, just more diffused. Less glare, more glow. You stand there for a moment and let your own breathing slow. In, cool and smooth. Out, warm and visible. The breath itself is a small fog, appearing only because your body is warm and the air outside is cool enough to reveal it. And as you continue down the street, the town remains gentle, the fog steady, and your thoughts begin to behave the same way. Less sharp, less urgent, more like mist moving slowly through a quiet valley. The street leads you to a small bridge over a drainage canal, and the fog gathers there as if it loves any hint of water. You lean on the rail and look down. The canal is only a narrow thread, but it moves steadily, and in the dim light It looks like liquid shadow. A few reeds bow toward the flow, their tips jeweled with moisture. In fog, the world loses contrast before it loses light. Edges soften first, distant shapes become pale, then faint, then simply part of the background. And in these pre-dawn minutes, your vision is already gentler, leaning toward brightness and motion more than color and detail. Fog amplifies that softness, turning the town into gradients instead of lines. You can use it rather than resist it. Let your gaze settle on something near the cold curve of the rail, the wet texture of the pavement, the slow pulse of water below. Let everything else remain vague. A car rolls past at the far end of the block, moving carefully. Its tires whisper. The taillights bloom into red ovals and then fade, leaving no sharp trace. You remember how bright headlights can glare in fog, light scattering back toward the driver's eyes, and you imagine the car keeping the light low and close to the road, where it helps rather than blinds. Even without a car, the idea is soothing. In fog, it's kinder to look down and near, not far and bright. The town seems to agree. The streetlights point downward. The reflective paint lines the way. Everything is designed for close guidance. You resume walking, and the fog shifts around you in slow curls, parting for a moment at your knees, then returning. It isn't something you cut through. It's something you share space with, like quiet. If you listen closely, you might hear your own clothing move, the soft brush of fabric, the smallest creak of a shoe. These tiny sounds become more noticeable when the bigger sounds are absent, and the noticing itself can be calming. It gives the mind a simple rhythm to hold. You pass a row of parked cars, each one wearing a thin sheen on its hood. On the glass, your breath makes a brief cloud when you exhale near it, then clears again. Warm meets cool, and the invisible shows itself for a moment, then returns to hidden. There is a gentle theme in all of this. The day is full of quiet ingredients. Vapor in air, heat in walls, moisture in soil. And the night reveals them by cooling, by slowing, by letting small changes matter. And now, as the sky continues its gradual brightening, you feel yourself drifting with it, not waking fully, but sinking more comfortably into that twilight state where thoughts are softer and time is less strict. The town may sharpen as the fog thins, but you don't have to sharpen with it. You can remain inside this calm, letting your attention stay close, letting your breath stay slow, letting the world be gentle for a little while longer. By the time you reach the edge of town again, the fog has begun to lift in delicate layers. A rooftop appears crisp for a moment, then softens as a thin ribbon drifts through. The hills are more defined now, their outlines returning like a pencil line darkening on paper. Morning is not arriving with a click. It's arriving the way fog moves, gradually, quietly, without any need to announce itself. You step onto a small path that climbs slightly, just enough to change what you can see. Behind you, the valley looks filled with pale milk, and above it the air seems clearer. The fog sits low, gathered where the night collected coolness, and you can sense how the landscape itself has shaped it. This is why fog can be so local. One neighborhood can be wrapped while another, a little higher, is already clear. A small rise, a stand of trees, a river bend, and the balance shifts. Weather is not always a single blanket. Sometimes it is a patchwork quilt laid carefully over the land. In some places on Earth, people have learned to treat fog as a kind of water source. Along dry coasts where fog rolls in regularly, simple mesh nets can be set up to catch droplets as they drift past. The droplets gather, merge, and run down into channels, turning a cloud you can walk through into water you can store. It's a quiet technology, almost humble, letting the atmosphere offer what it has. Even here, in this valley, you can see a smaller version of that idea. The trees along the path are already catching moisture. Their needles and leaves collect droplets, and every so often the droplets join and fall as a slow drip, watering the soil beneath. The fog is not only a view, it's part of the local water cycle, arriving softly and leaving softly. You pause and feel the air on your face. It's still cool, but not as heavy as earlier. The saturation is easing. The fog is thinning into mist, mist into clarity, clarity into a normal morning that will, soon enough, hold its usual sharpness. But you don't have to follow it there. In your mind, you turn gently back toward home. You imagine the door opening with a quiet click, the warmer air meeting you like a soft shawl. You set your mug down. You pull the curtains just enough to let a pale stripe of morning in, then let them fall closed again. Back in bed, everything is simple. The pillow, the blanket, the steady support beneath you. The room feels like a valley of its own, holding warmth, holding stillness, holding you. Let your breathing slow again, as if you're matching the fog's pace. In and out, longer on the release. Thoughts can drift in thin ribbons, and if they do, let them drift. You don't need to chase them. You don't need to sharpen them into plans. Outside, the last of the fog will dissolve when it's ready. Inside, you can dissolve into rest in the same gentle way. Quietly, gradually, naturally. Back in your room, the air is warmer, quieter, and the simplest things feel like an invitation. The blanket has a familiar weight. The pillow holds its shape the way a shoreline holds the sea, not gripping, just receiving. And as you settle, you can imagine the valley town continuing on without you, fog thinning along the river, lights clicking off one by one, the day beginning to assemble itself somewhere beyond the hills. But you are not assembling anything tonight. You are loosening. There's a gentle connection between that valley fog and the way sleep comes to you. Fog forms when the air cools to meet its dew point. Sleep, in its own way, arrives when your body cools in the evening and night, guided by a quiet internal rhythm. As bedtime approaches, most people begin to lose a little core warmth. It's not dramatic, not a sudden drop. It's subtle, a gradual easing, like a dimmer switch being turned down slowly. Blood flow shifts toward the skin of your hands and feet, helping heat drift outward, helping the center of the body cool. That cooling makes it easier to fall asleep, as if your body is finding its nighttime setting. You can feel a hint of that right now if you pay attention kindly. The warmth in your chest, the cooler air at the tip of your nose, the way your hands might feel slightly warmer under the blanket, and your feet, once tucked in, begin to soften and relax. The brain keeps time with light. When evening darkness arrives, signals in your body shift. Melatonin, often called a darkness hormone, begins to rise in many people, helping the night feel more night-like. It does not knock you out like a switch. It nudges, it invites, it says you can let go now, and you don't have to force any of it. You can simply allow the conditions that help sleep. Dimmer light, a steady temperature, a slower breath, fewer decisions. Fog does something similar to a landscape. It reduces distance. It muffles detail. It encourages a smaller world. Sleep asks for the same. It asks you to stop scanning the horizon of tomorrow, to stop sharpening your thoughts into plans, to let the edges blur. Take a gentle breath in and let it out slowly, longer than the inhale. If thoughts appear, let them appear like fog wisps. They can drift into view, curl for a moment, then thin and dissolve. You don't need to follow them into the distance. You can stay close to what is real and near. The weight of the blanket, the slow rise and fall of your breathing, the quiet safety of the room. Outside the story, the morning will arrive. Inside this moment, you are allowed to sink. The world can stay hazy. The mind can stay soft. And you can rest in that softness as naturally as a valley holds cool air before dawn. In the valley town, the sun is higher now, even if it's still hidden behind clouds or hills. And somewhere, quietly, someone is noticing what you already know. That fog is a delicate balance, and it responds to small changes. A shift in wind, a thin layer of cloud overhead, a little extra moisture rising from a river. The night's cooling was enough to form a veil, and the morning's warming will be enough to undo it. Forecasting fog is often about listening to these small signals. Clear nights allow the ground to radiate heat away more efficiently. Calm air allows coolness to pool. Moist air brings the dew point closer. If the temperature is predicted to fall toward that dew point, forecasters begin to suspect fog. Sometimes they talk about dew point depression, which is simply the gap between the air temperature and the dew point. When that gap becomes very small, the air is close to saturation. You don't need the term. You can think of it as two numbers walking toward each other in the dark. When they meet, the invisible can become visible. And in valleys, the land lends a hand. Cold air flows downhill and gathers in low places. It can't easily climb out, so the valley becomes a pocket of coolness, the perfect quiet bowl for fog. But if a breeze stirs, the bowl is disturbed. The cool air mixes upward. The moisture spreads out. Fog thins, sometimes before it can even form. That is why fog can be so hard to promise and so easy to miss. It depends on conditions that are gentle and precise. There is a calm lesson in that precision. Not everything big is loud. Not everything important is dramatic. Often, the world changes because of tiny differences. 1 degree, one breeze, one quiet hour of cooling. You can let that thought soothe you. Your own mind changes with tiny differences, too. A little less light, a little steadier breathing, a slightly cooler room, a body that is no longer braced for effort. Sleep is not a battle you win. It is a condition you allow. Imagine the valley again, fog lying low over a field. The sun warms the upper air first, then the rooftops, then the streets. The fog loosens, breaks into ribbons, and returns to invisibility. Nothing fights, nothing forces. Everything simply follows the quiet rules of warmth and water. Let those rules be kind to you tonight. If you notice tension, you can treat it as fog treats a sharp light, scattering it, softening it, refusing to let it pierce the whole scene. Let the tension blur at the edges. Let it become less defined. Let it be present without being central. Breath in, slow and smooth. Breath out, longer, softer, as if you're letting your body cool by a fraction, the way the valley cooled by a fraction, just enough for a change. You don't have to do anything else. You only have to let the night do what it knows how to do. There are instruments in the world designed to measure what the senses already feel. In a foggy place, visibility can be tracked by sending a beam of light through the air and watching how much of it is scattered or how much reaches a sensor on the other side. Some devices look upward and estimate cloud height. Others measure humidity and temperature, searching for that moment when air becomes nearly saturated. It's a quiet kind of care, the way humans build tools to notice what is subtle. And yet, even with instruments, fog remains a creature of small changes. A sensor can tell you the air is moist, the temperature is falling, the wind is calm, but the exact way fog gathers in a single street or along a single river bend depends on the land's tiniest shapes and the night's tiniest movements. That is why fog can surprise you. You turn a corner and it's thicker. You climb a small rise and it's clearer. You step into a park and it's cooler. The atmosphere is not a solid wall. It's a living mixture, always shifting, always settling into whatever balance the moment allows. Tonight, you can choose to like that uncertainty. You can let it remind you that you don't need perfect control to be safe. Your bed is your reliable valley. Your room is your gentle bowl. The blankets hold warmth. The walls keep out wind. the light is dim, the night is steady. If you want, you can imagine your thoughts as tiny droplets suspended in air. They are not heavy. They do not have to fall as rain. They can float for a moment and then dissolve back into nothing. Some thoughts are like bright headlights in fog. They glare, they scatter, they make the air feel crowded. When that happens, the kindest thing is not to shine brighter. The kindest thing is to lower the beam, to aim your attention down and close. Return to sensation, the feel of fabric against your skin, the quiet temperature of the air, the weight of your body being held, the gentle rhythm of breath. And as you rest on what is near, your mind naturally stops trying to see so far ahead. Tomorrow becomes less urgent when it is far away, softened behind a veil. Tonight becomes enough. Outside the story, a town is sharpening into day. Inside you, everything can soften into night. Let the last edges blur. Let the room become simpler. Let your breathing become the only movement you need to notice. In and out, slow as mist drifting across grass. Nothing is being demanded of you now. The night is doing its calm work, and you can let it. Somewhere in the valley, the fog has become a memory of itself. It is no longer a blanket across the whole town. It's a few pale pockets in the lowest places, near the river, in the shaded park, along a field where grass still holds the night's chill. In the sun, the air is clearer. Under trees, the last wisps linger, reluctant but gentle. If you could watch from above, you would see the fog retreating like a tide, not pulled away by force, but dissolved by warmth. Droplets evaporate back into vapor. The visible returns to invisible. The world regains its edges, and that change can be comforting because it is reversible. Fog is not a failure of the atmosphere. It is a phase. It is one of the ways the air holds water, then releases it again. You can think of your wakefulness the same way. It isn't a problem if you're still awake. It's a phase. It will change when conditions become right. When your body cools a touch more, when your thoughts thin, when your attention stops traveling so far. If you find yourself listening, let the sounds be simple. A faint hum from a machine, a distant car, the quiet shift of fabric as you breathe. These sounds are like the town's early morning, ordinary, harmless, passing through. And if you find yourself seeing images, small memories, small plans, let them be like fog shapes. They don't need to mean anything. They can appear and fade without being interpreted. Tonight, there is nothing to solve. There is only the slow rhythm of the night, the way it helps living things rest, the way it lowers lights, the way it cools air, the way it softens edges, the way it makes the world quiet enough for sleep to feel possible. You might imagine again that valley street with its blinking signal and its wet pavement. The fog made every light bloom into a gentle halo. In your mind, You can let your own thoughts bloom and soften like that. No sharp outlines, no harsh corners, only glow. Breath in, steady. Breath out, slow. The exhale is your release, your small letting go, your quiet dissolving. And now, without pushing, without expecting, you can allow the very last bit of alertness to thin, the way the last pocket of fog thins beside a riverbank as sunlight slowly reaches it. Nothing dramatic happens. No moment needs to be marked. You simply drift, gently, toward stillness. The valley town is fully morning now, but we don't have to follow it. We can stay in the tender hour, the one that belongs to rest, to quiet breath, to softened edges, the one where you are allowed to be unfinished, unplanned, unhurried. Let your face relax again, as if it's melting into the pillow. Let your shoulders drop, the way fog drops into a low meadow. Let your hands rest open, fingers loose, as if they no longer need to hold anything at all. If you want a simple image to carry you down into sleep, let it be this: a river in early light, a field beside it, a thin veil of mist lifting slowly, not torn away, not chased, simply warmed, simply changed, returning to invisibility, as if it was never separate from the air. And in that same quiet way, your thoughts can return to invisibility too. A plan can fade, a worry can thin, a memory can soften. Nothing has to be pushed away. It can simply dissolve when it's ready. Breath in, cool and calm. Breath out, warm and long. Let the out-breath be your signal that you are safe enough to let go. The world outside will keep its rhythms. The sun will rise, streets will fill, messages will arrive, but none of that belongs to you right now. Right now belongs to the gentle physics of sleep, cooling, slowing, softening, settling. You have done enough for one day. You have carried enough. Now you can rest the way the valley rests under fog, held, quiet, protected from distance. And as the last thin ribbon of wakefulness drifts away, you slip into the calm that has been waiting for you all along. Good night.